Item number 10, conduct of business. Item A, receive oral report regarding the state pension reform legislation to take effect January 2013.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, and Council Member O'Connell on Skype, I'm pleased to present you with a short presentation on the pension reform bill, which runs about 39 single-spaced pages. We've tried to condense it down into just a few slides. So as you can see from the first slide, this was recently adopted. It's going to be in effect, or start being in effect, at the beginning of the year, and it covers pretty much all state pension plans, not all of them, but most of them, and we'll talk about the ones that it doesn't cover. So we just want to take a quick look at how San Bruno pays for employee pensions now. The employees pay a fixed percentage, which is either 8 or 9%, depending upon what category they're in, and that percentage is fixed by state law. The City of San Bruno pays for the remaining cost of the pension, and that cost has several components to it, which I won't get into the details of, but essentially it's about 18.5% of the employees pay for miscellaneous employees, and a little over 36.5% of the employee pay for safety. So the takeaway from that is that in essence, cities across the state, including San Bruno, essentially assume the risk that changing demographics, variations in investment returns, and so on, won't exactly match PERS's actuarial model that they've used to set the rates for any particular year. So that's why the city sees fluctuating rates over time and why employees pay a fixed percentage. So let's just take a quick look at how PERS itself has done over the years, and the answer is not too bad, considering there are a lot of other pension funds that are in worse shape than PERS. They're about 75% funded for both miscellaneous and safety. And PERS's position is that the unfunded liability is really an accounting issue, not a solvency issue. The reason for that is they don't have to pay the entire amount out in 1 year or even 5 or 10 or 20 years. It's essentially a very, very long-term system, and so it's okay for them to be in the neighborhood of about 75% funded. They don't have to be 100% funded. The other piece of good news from PERS is that their average rate of return over the last 30 years has exceeded what they've assumed by about 2%, and so that's pretty good. However, as you'll see in the next slide, that actual rate of return really fluctuates significantly, and that's what causes their investment return to look like this. So we're hoping that nobody here in the audience or at home has an IRA or an investment fund whose performance looks like this. That would be a very volatile fund to have. But PERS can have it because they have such a long investment horizon. This is not the kind of performance volatility that you would even expect or want for your own pension fund. The effect of this volatility is it does affect employer contribution rates on a yearly basis, and we'll see why that is in just a minute. So let's talk about the actual law and what it doesn't do. First of all, it doesn't affect public entities that have their own non-state pension system. There are a few of those. There are charter cities where the electorate can set pension benefits, and those are the ones you tend to read about in the newspaper: San Francisco, San Diego, San Jose. I think they've got something on the ballot there. And the new law does not affect the vested rights of current members of either PERS or other what's called reciprocal pension systems. And all a reciprocal system is one that says, if you're in our system, then you can transfer over into PERS or some other system that has that reciprocity. So the bottom line is no changes to current retiree benefits, no changes to benefit formulas or optional benefits for current members, absent some sort of collective bargaining, and the employee contribution rates, the 8 and 9% that we saw on the slide before, are not required to be changed until 2018, and even that with a few caveats, and we'll look at that in just a second. All right, so let's take a look and see how the law affects current San Bruno employees. So the first thing is the law requires that as an employee, you've got to contribute at least half of the normal cost of your pension by 2018. But what the law does is set a cap of 8% for miscellaneous, 12% for safety. Well, if you remember from the previous slide, miscellaneous already paying 8%. So under the new law, they wouldn't have to pay any more, even though 8% isn't necessarily half of the normal cost of the pension now, or may not be in the future. As far as safety is concerned, right now they're at 9%, they could go to 12%, but that has to be collectively bargained. So there's a little bit of ambiguity in the law about whether the city can impose that in 2018 or whether there's some other process that will have to be used, and most of the opinion at the moment is that it will have to be bargained for. So that's how it's going to affect current employees. It's also going to affect current employees because they won't be able to purchase service credit after the first of the year. So if you're a city employee in this city or anywhere else in the state, if you want to buy that extra service credit, now's the time to do it. There's no retroactive pension enhancements. If you get convicted of a felony, you don't get part of your pension, and you can't come back to work as an employee except under limited circumstances. So that's how the law affects current San Bruno employees. Let's take a look for a second and see how the law is going to affect new members, that is, new members in PERS, people who have never been in PERS before or in any other reciprocal system. What's going to happen after the first of the year? And the answer is that for those new people coming into the system, there's a new retirement formula for miscellaneous employees. As you see, 2% at 62, maximum benefit of 2.5 at 67. So right now, the city has a more favorable formula than that. The new safety formula is going to be 2.7 at 57. And employees aren't going to be able to use their highest year of performance in terms of pay. They'll have to average over 3 years. In addition to that, they can't use overtime or other kinds of payouts to enhance their pension, and their income that's pensionable is going to be capped at $132,000. So that's a significant difference for new members that come in. And there's really just a couple of other changes. There's no supplemental plans. Oftentimes cities would adopt other defined benefit plans in order to supplement PERS, and you're not going to be able to do that anymore for new members who come in after the first of the year. And then last but not least, our contributions to a deferred comp plan, like a 457 plan, is no longer going to be a vested right. It's not, frankly, clear that it was a vested right to begin with, but the law makes it clear that employers are free to change that if they wish. All right, so let's take a look and see how the new law is going to affect the city's pension costs, if at all. Well, first of all, the new law only applies to these new members, people who have never been in PERS or any other reciprocal system. But we're told by the Human Resources Department that about 80% of the city's new hires in the past 5 years were actually new members. And so what that tells us is if that trend continues over the longer term, we are going to see a decrease in those pension costs because most of the new hires are new members that are going to be subject to the new and less expensive rules. However, the short-term costs are likely to increase. Now, why is that? Well, PERS says that it's going to increase for the employer about 0.5% to 5%. That's a pretty big swing. In fact, that's an order of magnitude. They think it's going to be on the low end, but if it's only 1%, as you can see, it's a little over $200,000 to the city. So we do expect that the costs are going to go up. And if you go back to that big chart with all the volatility, the reason why the rates go up is because the peaks don't show up in the rates until a few years afterward, and the lows are smoothed out over several years, so they don't catch up with each other, and that's why you see the rates going up. So finally, what's next? We've yet to see whether there's going to be an effect on retention or recruitment. We don't know the answer to that yet. And I think it's safe to say that it's not over yet. I think that you'll see some additional legislation for some more reforms, especially to have the employees take on some of that risk, some of that volatility in some way. And I think we'll also continue to see the potential for voter initiatives at a local level where that's permitted in charter cities and in other cities that aren't subject to PERS. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good. Questions? I think you marked pretty concise and actually
Thank you
understandable.
very much. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.